Now listen to me, my most beautiful friends. Sometimes you want to send a message to someone you love so much, but you don't know where they are.
alta es la luna cuando empieza a esclarecer, y yo hermosa y sin ventura nunca llegué a nacer. Y yo hermosa y sin ventura nunca llegué a nacer. Mis ojos me se hincharon de tanto mirar la mar. Vapóricos van y vienen, letra para mí no hay. Vapóricos van y vienen, letra para mí no hay. Dos taras tiene con él, la una que arrollada, la otra que echa sheshbesh. La una que arrollada, la otra que echa sheshbesh. Mi querido es alto y vano y una vara de expander. Mi madre hizo cola, lo metió a detener. Mi madre hizo cola, lo metió a detener. Na, 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 na,
שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יכה קר וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im Shabbat Torah study. We are going to be studying this week. We're going to be studying Leviticus chapter 15, which is continuing on the issue, as a friend of mine used to say, the issue of issue. It's the issue out of the male and female genitalia and how that causes a person to enter a ritual state of impurity. So yes, it's a little bit more exciting than leprosy because it involves genitalia. Whenever you hear the word genitalia, people get excited. I don't know why, it just happens. One of those things. So it should be interesting and a little bit more accessible because it's something we can relate to a bit more today, unlike the idea of leprosy, which we really don't have any, experience or touch point for that here in this day and age. So we'll get into that in a little while. And let me just start off by saying, well, I wanted to speak about a little bit about my experience in my first month back here in Israel. It's been mostly a positive experience, I have to say, but definitely a couple of observations. I think observations that are relevant. Let me see if I can get this background working a little bit better. Okay, that makes me look right there. That makes me look like an angel. I don't know why it's doing that. But maybe if I hold on a second, if I make this bigger, let's see here. Maybe I don't have to be so close to the screen. Okay, that works, I think. So as I was saying, yeah, no, maybe I'll make it a little bit smaller the way I'm used to. So, it's been mostly a positive experience. Things are taking a little bit longer to get set up here than I had originally anticipated and hoped. I'm still kind of living in temporary housing. I'm staying with, let's see, a friend's sister's sublet. I'm subletting from my friend's sister's sublet while I still try to decide where exactly I want to live. I went up and visited Ariella and Ben about a month ago, and I absolutely fell in love with Katzrin in the north. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I would love to consider living there. There are certain factors, which I won't get into right now, but in the meantime, probably I'm going to just end up getting something in the Jerusalem area. I've been living out in Tekoa, which is a settlement. It's they call it a settlement in the West Bank, but it really is more like a suburb of Jerusalem. Has a very suburban feel to it, and it's fine. It's fine for now. It does fulfill some of my desires and some of my needs. I have always wanted to live out in Yehuda Shomron, to be an official settler, even though, like I said, it's really looks more like a suburb. You almost feel like you're in Long Island or something like that, a suburb of New York or something like that. But that may be a bit of an illusion because it is definitely in the West Bank, and it's surrounded by Arab villages. You hear the call to prayer 5 times a day, and so on and so forth. So that's where I've been. I don't know if it's appropriate there to set up a Karaite community, just because it's kind of a very small, closed community. It's might be because it's not explicitly dati. It's kind of very it's very what's the word? Not multicultural, but it's very it doesn't have, it allows all types of views, although that usually doesn't include Karaite views, which are usually shunned no matter where you go. But it's kind of a small, closed community. It's not like, let's say, being in Jerusalem, where you just have neighborhoods where nobody really knows all of their. I mean, they know their neighbors much more than they do in the United States, but nobody knows all their neighbors. So you can kind of establish a community. If we start moving Karaites into Tekoa, then people are going to notice really quick, and there might be some backlash if we start trying to establish a community there. But we'll see. I'm leaving it in Yahweh's hands. He's been guiding me in some really amazing ways and unexpected ways, and I'm just going to leave it in his hands. I'm just trying to, thanks to my dear friend Olivia, who always emphasizes staying in the moment, and I'm trying to do that, and just seeing where everything is meant to take me, and we'll see where things end up. So other observations of my first month back. I really hate this background. I might get rid of it. It's really annoying. Let's see. I go like this. Other experiences of my first month in Israel, my first month back in Israel, I should say, is my first impression is, and I'm just shooting from the hip here, is that Israelis they're really nice. They really are. They're nice and they're friendly and they're helpful. and they've gotten a lot more polite over the years. I have to say, they're just really nice people. The bottom line is, and a lot of the problems in this country come not from the fact that they're not nice or not nice, but that the nation is so lost. The nation is so confused about. No, the background's not real. It's a fake background. I mean, it's a picture that I took in Ein Qara'im many, many years ago. I think in 2005, if I'm not mistaken, of the fog settling in the valley in the valleys of around Ein Qara'im in Jerusalem, on the outskirts of Jerusalem in the Jerusalem forest in the very early morning. But no, it is not a real background. That's why you're getting all those weird effects, like when I go, oh, there I just disappeared. Oh, magic trick. So, at any rate, yeah, I found that Israelis, they've really been nice overall. And again, just kind of shooting off the hip, I found that I think that the Chilunim, the non-religious, have been nicer than the religious, to be honest. I don't know what it is, but I guess the religious kind of have maybe a chip on their shoulder, or they have something to prove, or I don't know what it is. But my experiences with the Chilunim, my experiences with the Chilunim overall have been more pleasant than my experience with the Dati'im, whether it's the Dati Leumi, the ones that wear the knitted kippah, or the Charidim, the ones that wear, the ultra orthodox. But maybe it's because I've been really hanging around more with Dati'im than I have with Chilunim. Maybe I were hanging out with Chilunim more than my experience would be that, they're a little bit less nice than the Dati'im, because, after a while we just see the other side. But I have to say that that's been my experience so far. And, overall. And, people have, well, let's say where I am, some people have been really nice and gone out of their way for me. And a lot have been, how can I say? I can't say they've been not nice, but they haven't been extra nice. They haven't gone above and beyond. And if we look in the Torah, part of the idea of the nation of Israel is that we're supposed to go above and beyond for each other. It's not that we're just supposed to, treat each other like we would treat any other human beings. It's supposed to be a nation, a family, a brotherhood, and you go out of your way for your family and your brothers and sisters more than you would just for the average person. And I think that's what I feel is missing a little bit here to a certain degree. Again, my experience has been, well, I won't get into details where, but I feel like people some have really gone out of their way for me, and really gone out of their way for me. And, but many have kind of like just treated me as if like, I'm just another, like another person off the street. Like they didn't really go out of their way for me. I'll just give an example of people who, well, I won't give specific examples, but there are people who didn't really go out of their way. They wanted, let's say, what I would have offered to my brother or sister or my fellow family member, my fellow Jew for free. They wanted money for it. That's one example. And I do understand it to a certain degree. Prices in this country have gone up ridiculously. I mean, the prices here are just insane. They're almost as expensive as New York. Not quite, but almost as expensive for anyone who's been here before. I remember when falafels cost, a whole falafel cost about 8 shekels. Now it costs about 25 shekels. I remember when a shawarma, which I don't eat shawarma, I'm a vegetarian. I do eat fish sometimes, and eggs and dairy, but basically a vegetarian. And I remember when a shawarma was like 18 shekels, if even, maybe 15, 18, max 20 shekels. Now a shawarma is about 50 shekels. Prices have either doubled or even tripled in some cases. If you sit down and just get a cake and a cup of coffee, a cup of a cappuccino, which when I lived in Portugal cost about €1.20, I would say. So that's equivalent to maybe 5 shekels or something like that. Here it costs 16 shekels. So just to give you an idea, Portugal is a very inexpensive country, and everything here is double to triple the prices you would find in Portugal. And I think it just strains people a lot because the salaries are not double to triple what they are in Portugal. The salaries are almost commensurate with what you would find in Portugal. And the prices here are double or triple. So I think people are really strained for money. And so I understand that, and I accept that to a certain degree. But what I would say is that even if they're stressed for money, maybe that's not the only reason. Maybe it's just that people here forgot a little bit that they're supposed to treat each other like brothers. Like, for instance, if I allowed if someone came to Israel and needed a place to stay, I would not even think of charging them money to stay there. Okay. Yes, it's true that if they stayed for a while, then it would be only fair that they pay electricity, they pay water, maybe, I probably wouldn't even charge them for that, to be 100% honest, unless for a really long period of time, but it's only fair. Okay. But to charge, and if they were staying for a really long time, then yes, I would say, yes, it's only fair that you chip in for some rent or something like that. But certainly not on like the first or second day would I start talking about, if you want to stay here, that's very nice, but let's talk about what rent you should pay so I can make back some of the money off my rent. So, that's, again, it's not that it's a mean thing to do. It's just not a super, super extra nice thing to do. It's not the way you would treat your own family member, right? If your mother if your mother came to visit you for a month from another country, you wouldn't start charging her rent, right? So that's, I think, what's lacking a little bit here. And yes, I understand there are some economic problems here. I understand that there are some economic problems here, and so people are stressed for money because things are so ridiculously expensive. But on the other hand, I always like to say, and I've been saying for years, I used to say that, Israelis and Jews living here always say that the reason we have, I used to relate it to the wars, the reason we act the way we do, and that usually meant being rude to each other, being nasty to each other, taking advantage of each other, is because we've had to go through so many wars. And I always used to say, no, it's just the opposite. The reason you've gone through so many wars is because of the way you act with each other. And I'll say the same with the economic problems. Which is, oops, there goes my face disappearing again, which is that, so we can easily blame the behavior of Jews, Israelis, people in this country on the fact that they're economically stressed. So because they're economically stressed, they have to kind of, find how to get every cent out of another person. So the economic stress leads to the bad behavior. But I would claim just the opposite. It's the bad behavior that leads to the economic stress. The way that we treat each other, the fact that we don't treat each other like family, the fact that we don't treat each other like brothers and sisters all the time, brings down, instead of blessing upon us, brings down curse upon us. And so the result of that is that we're economically stressed. And I'd like to relate it to a verse in the Torah, if I can find it here. 1 second. If I can find it. Just 1 second here. Yes. 2 Kings, chapter 7, verse 1. It's with Elisha, the prophet. Elisha is the prophet that took over from Eliyahu, from Elijah. So 2 Kings, chapter 7. Let me just see if I can bring it up here. 2 Kings, chapter 7. One second here while it comes up. Famine besieged Samaria. Okay. So this is when the Arameans attacked Israel, and I'll just read. Actually, I'll put up the verses. Hold on a second. Let's do it this way. Present. Share screen. 2 Kings 6. Share. There we go. So we'll just start here. I'm just going to read in the English for now, since it's not part of the formal Torah study. So sometime later, Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, mobilized his entire army and marched up and laid siege to Samaria. Samaria was the capital city of the northern kingdom of Israel. There was a great famine in the city. The siege lasted so long that a donkey's head sold for 80 shekels of silver, something like it would today for a shawarma. It's 50 shekels today, but it was 80 shekels for a donkey's head, okay? And a quarter of a cab, that's a dry measure, of seed pods sold for 5 shekels. As the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, a woman cried to him, "Help me, my lord the king." The king replied, "If Yahweh does not help you, where can I get help for you?" from the threshing floor, from the winepress. Then he asked her, "What's the matter?" She answered, "This woman said to me, 'Give up your son so we may eat him today, and tomorrow we'll eat my son.' So we cooked my son and ate him. The next day I said to her, 'Give up your son so we may eat him.' But she had hidden him." So the famine was so bad. This is actually where I am right now. I'm in a co-working space at the place I'm staying, and there's an elevator that goes empties right into the co-working space. It's the weirdest thing. At any rate, so every so often you may hear a ding in the background, and an elevator door may open. It's just the weirdest place. It's like having an elevator in your bathroom or something like that. When the king heard the woman's words, he tore his robes. So, well, I'll just read. As he went along the wall, the people looked, and they saw that under his robes he had sackcloth on his body. He said, "May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if the head of Elisha, son of Shaphat, remains on his shoulders today." Because Elisha, the prophet, had predicted that this would happen. Now Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him. The king sent a messenger ahead, but before he arrived, Elisha said to the elders, "Don't you see how this murderer is sending someone to cut off my head? Look, when the messenger comes about, shut the door and hold it shut against him. Is not the sound of his master's footsteps behind him?" While he was still talking to them, the messenger came down to him. The king said, "This disaster is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord, for Yahweh, any longer?" And then Elisha replies, "Hear the word of Yahweh. This is what Yahweh says about this time tomorrow. Seah of the finest flour will sell for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria." So in other words, the Arameans are going to be chased. Ben-Hadad and the Arameans are going to be chased away. We'll see how in a second. And once they're chased away, the siege on the city will be over, and the famine will end, and the prices will be real cheap. So a donkey's head during the famine was 80 shekels, and what was the other one? Whatever it was expensive as well. And tomorrow, a seah, a bag of flour, is going to be 1 shekel, and 2 seahs of barley are going to be 1 shekel. It means a seah of barley for a bag of barley for half a shekel. So the prices are going to go way down. And the lesson that we learn from this is that when Yahweh intervenes, or when Yahweh decides to bring blessing on the people, then good economic times result. And when Yahweh decides to bring curses on the people, then bad economic times result. And it's not the other way around. So our bad economic times in Israel come from the way we treat each other. It's not that we treat each other because of this way, because of the bad economic times. Yeah, it's a feedback loop and all, but the bottom line is the solution for this is not economic. The solution is to treat each other better, and then we will all work collaboratively towards the same goal. And Yahweh will get involved, and he will bring blessing upon us, and then the nation will be prosperous. People will not have to work hard. People won't have to worry about where their next shekel is going to come from, as they do in this country every single day. And they have to skimp and save, and they have to go into debt. And with the banks, the Israeli banks are absolute scum. I mean, they're just hideous. I mean, they're worse than the banks in America. They just squeeze every last penny with fees and interest, which of course is illegal in the Torah. Thanks to the rabbis. The rabbis gave them the freedom to get around it because they're a business rather than an individual. Anywho, we won't go down that route right now. But the bottom line is all of the problems, the economic problems we have in Israel, the military, the war problems that we have in Israel, everything stems from the way we treat each other. Everything stems from the fact that we are not properly following the Torah. Rather than the other way around. We don't treat each other like crap because we have wars. We have wars because we treat each other like crap. We don't treat each other harshly because we have bad economic times. We have bad economic times because we treat each other harshly. We're not bringing down the drippings, the dew from the heaven that Yahweh would love to shower down upon us if only we would follow his word and treat each other like brothers and sisters and family members. So that has been my main observation here in Israel so far. I'll just go ahead a little bit with the story so you can see how it ends up. So the officer whose arm the king was leaning on said to the man of God, "Look, even if Yahweh should open the floodgates of heavens, could this happen?" Meaning, could the prices just drop suddenly? "You will see with your own eyes," answered Elisha, "but you will not eat any of it." Now there were 4 men with leprosy. We've been studying about leprosy. So again, bad translation, but I'm just reading the English with Sara'at. At the entrance of the city gate, they said to each other, "Why stay here until we die? If we say we'll go into the city, the famine is there, and we will die. And if we stay here, we will die. So let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and surrender. If they spare us, we will live. If they kill us, then we will die." At dusk, they got up. So now we have 4 lepers, for lack of a better translation, getting up and going to the camp of the Arameans. At dusk, they got up and went to the camp of the Arameans. When they reached the edge of the camp, no one was there. For Yahweh had caused the Arameans to hear the sounds of chariots and horses and a great army. So they said to one another, "Look, the king of Israel has hired the Hittite and Egyptian kings to attack us." So they got up and fled in the dusk and abandoned their tents and their horses and donkeys. They left the camp as it was and ran for their lives. So the entire Aramean army under Ben-Hadad, who had come to attack Israel and had put a siege around Samaria. Again, Samaria was the capital city of the northern kingdom of Israel. We're talking about the northern kingdom after the split. They are gone. The whole army just got up and left. The men who had leprosy reached the edge of the camp, entered one of the tents, and ate and drank. Then they took silver, gold, and clothes and went off and hid them. They returned and entered another tent and took some things from it and hid them also. Then they said to each other, "What we're doing is not right. This is day of good news, and we're keeping it to ourselves. If we wait until daylight, punishment will overtake us." Hold on a second here. One sec. Okay, the elevator doors opening and closing. Let's go at once and report this to the royal palace. So they went and called out to the city gatekeepers and told them, "We went into the Aramean camp and no one was there, not a sound of anyone, only tethered horses and donkeys, and the tents left just as they were." The gatekeepers shouted the news and it was reported within the palace. The king got up in the night and said to his officers, "I will tell you what the Arameans have done to us. They know we are starving." So they left the camp to hide in the countryside, thinking they will surely come out and then we'll take them alive and get into the city. One of his officers answered, "Have some men take 5 of the horses that are left in the city. Their plight will be like that of all the Israelites left here. Yes, they will only be like the Israelites who are doomed. So let us send them to find out what would happen." In other words, it's a siege. We're all going to die anyway. So we might as well just send people with a couple of remaining horses to go to the camp of the Arameans and check out what's really going on, to see if it's a ruse, if the Arameans are just have left their camp as a ruse and they're hiding up in the hills waiting for the Israelites to go out to the camp to take spoils, and then they would come down and attack them while they're starving, or if it's real. So they selected 2 chariots with their horses, and the king sent them after the Aramean army. He commanded the drivers, "Go and find out what has happened." They followed them as far as the Jordan River, and they found the whole road strewn with the clothing and equipment the Arameans had thrown away in their headlong flight. So it was clear from this the Arameans had fled in fear, had fled in terror, had gotten the heck out of Dodge or out of Samaria. So the messengers returned and reported to the king. Then the people went out and plundered the camp of the Arameans. So a seah of the finest flour sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel, as Yahweh had said. We'll just finish the chapter here. Let's see. No, that's okay. Should open them. All right, we'll just read to the end of the chapter. Now the king had put the officer on whose arm he leaned in charge of the gate, and the people trampled him in the gateway, and he died just as the man of God had foretold when the king came down to the house. This is already getting out. Okay, we're going to end it there, right? So we see that when Yahweh decided to bring blessing upon the Israelites, upon the children of Israel, then miracles happen, and suddenly their economic problems, their siege, their famine, their hunger, all of their problems just disappeared in a heartbeat. And they were so skeptical, right? The king was so skeptical that he didn't believe when Elisha told him that the following day that the price would fall, to extremely cheap prices. It would be like, instead of paying 50 shekels for a shawarma as people do now in Israel, it would be like paying 3 shekels for a shawarma or something like that. It would go down to the prices I saw in Portugal, or even lower. Actually, the cheapest country I was ever in was Tunisia. Prices there are really cheap. If you ever want a good place to live cheap, go to Tunisia. It's also a very nice place, very interesting. And there are still some Jews there, although I don't know what their situation is going to be in the near future. At any rate, so we get the idea, right? The idea here is that the way we treat each other determines our safety, determines whether we have war or peace, determines whether we have economic prosperity or economic stress, economic problems. It's not the other way around. It's not that the war causes us to act poorly and treat each other like crap, or that the economic stress causes us to act poorly and treat each other like crap. That might be so, because it's kind of a feedback loop. But what's really going on is that because we treat each other like crap, we have wars, we have economic stress, we have strife, we have all of these things. So that has been one of my main observations here. Yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. There's a lot more that I could say. The other thing that I really noticed, is how much the Arabs being in this land really affect everything. They just change the culture. Their culture is such a dark culture. It's such an unhappy, miserable, dark culture, to be 100% honest. I mean, they can be very what's the word? Hospitable, but that's part of their culture. But in a certain sense, it's just a very, very dark, aggressive, and you feel the hate coming from them, and it really, I think, affects the rest of us here in Israel. I mean, there are millions of Arabs in Israel. Yes, a lot of them are separated, right? They live separately from the Jews, but their very presence in the land, I think, really, really creates a very negative kind of atmosphere here. And then I think it rubs off onto the Jews because they're put under that same kind of negative stress, that negative energy, and then we do it to each other. So another major observation is, that I'll put it mildly, the situation has to be taken care of. The sooner the better. But I think there are going to be some major changes in Israel because I just think things are reaching an inflection point. I don't think they can go on the way they have been going on. I think people are, especially after October 7th, they're scared. They're terrified here, actually. I was speaking, there's the elevator again. 1 second. Is it an empty elevator or are people going to walk out of it? Let's see. 1 second. Just give me a second here. So as I was saying, it's kind of weird when people just are standing there staring at you when the elevator door opens. So as I was saying, what was I saying? Yeah, I don't think this can go on much longer. I think people are really scared here. They're terrified, especially after October 7th. They feel that this can happen again. They've wised up a little bit to the myth that we can make any kind of peace with what you call first floor men's lingerie. Tell me about it. Yeah, maybe I should just do the class in my underpants. Now I can do that with the background here. No one would know. All right, next time I'll do it. Okay, this time I'll just keep my clothes on. All right. So yeah, I think people are really scared. In fact, I was speaking to some Israelis last night. And they said they just came back to Israel, and they said Dafka Akshav, which means now is when you decide to come back of all times. And I said yes, yep, specifically now is when I wanted to be back with all of the problems to do my little part to help. So people are scared, and people are very economically stressed here to the point where they really are getting to the point where they can't afford rent, they can't afford houses, especially in the big cities. Jerusalem has become extremely expensive. They have to go into debt with the banks, the banks are just vicious. The banks are what's the word I'm looking for? They're there's a specific word that I'm looking for. They're I can't think of the word right now, but they're just vicious. They're ready to bring people into debt so they can make their interest. These so-called Israeli, so-called Jewish banks are more than happy to let people go into debt so they can make interest, or that they can default on the debt and then they can collect using the various the collection mechanisms that are built into the government. It's called Hotzat Lafoal here, which means, well, you never want to deal with it, believe me. So that's it. That's what I'm seeing right here, and that kind of sums it up. Like I said, I'll just sum up what I've been saying. I found that Israelis overall, to be really nice, friendly, helpful. They're wonderful people. They really are. In so many ways, they really are. My experience has been that the non-religious, the Chilonim, have been nicer to me and much more accepting and less judgmental than the religious. Again, maybe there's a certain bias there because I just happen to, because I'm staying in Tekoa, which happens to be mostly religious. And by the way, Tekoa is the birthplace of the prophet Amos, or at least near. I don't know if it's specifically there. It might not be the same place where the ancient city of Tekoa is, but it's right near it. And I find that the Dati'im, the religious, are a little bit more judgmental. They're a little bit more, I don't know. I just haven't found them to be as nice And then the other main observation is, yes, I will dedicate this study to Mickey. Thank you. Thank you, Marianne. And the other main observation is that we should not believe the myth that goes around that Israelis or that people in Israel treat each other the way they do because of all the wars and because of all their economic strife. No, it's just the opposite. They have all these wars and all of this economic strife because we treat each other the way we do. And so I think that we're reaching an inflection point, just like is the case in the United States. Clearly, something is brewing in the United States. It doesn't matter who wins the election, who loses the election. It doesn't matter if Biden's body drops dead, just like his mind is already dropped dead. If he's replaced with that lovely, friendly lady that everyone loves so much. And I'm not even talking about Hillary Clinton. I'm talking about Kamala Harris, whatever the heck her name is. But something big is going to be happening, it seems, in the United States within the next half a year to a year, right? So I think big things are going to be happening here in Israel as well. Okay, so those are my thoughts in terms of setting up Karaite communities here, which is one of the main goals that I want to accomplish when I'm back here. First I have to establish my own situation. I have to get out of kind of a temporary housing situation to a permanent housing situation, no matter where it is, and then I can figure out what the next steps are. It seems for sure that Ariella and Ben, who are very, very gung-ho about setting up a Karaite community in Katzrin, up in the Golan Heights, it's just absolutely beautiful up there. Especially will be beautiful in the wintertime. It seems like we're gonna work on establishing something up there. Whether I live up there initially or not, it would seem that something is gonna get going there. And then if I stay in the Jerusalem area, I'll have to figure out how to start setting up a World Alliance of Qara'im community in the Jerusalem area. Whether it'll be in Tekoa or somewhere else remains to be seen. So I first have to work out my personal situation, and then I can start working on these more lofty goals. So any suggestions you have, any help you have, any ideas you have, practical help or theoretical help, then just let me know. Here we go. 1 second, please. 1 second. I wish I could just tape this elevator door shut. Maybe I should get some duct tape and just tape it shut because nobody gets out of the elevator. They just it just opens here. I guess they press it by mistake, and then I'm sitting here. It's like the weirdest thing. Anywho, so yes, I know they were all talk, no actions. It honestly reminds me a lot of what I've experienced here in Israel. A lot of people are all talk and no action, but I'm specifically surprised, actually, believe it or not, by the Christians, because they really claim to be more than all talk and no action, but I guess they are all talk and no action. Anywho, so that's that. We're going to start now looking into Leviticus chapter 15. So let me bring that up. Let me share the screen differently. Oh, and by the way, before I forget, we're going to stop the study at 7:45 sharp or before. That's right, Jerusalem time, that is. Right now it's 6 o'clock, so in another hour and 45 minutes, we're going to stop the study because we're going to all go, whoever's in Israel, we're going to all go and observe the new moon. We're going to look for the new moon. The new moon will be visible tonight between 7:48 p.m. and I think it was 8:29 p.m. Let me just confirm that. 7:48 and 8:27 p.m. in Israel. Give or take a minute or two, depending on in Israel where you are. But so we're going to stop and we'll go do the new moon observation for anyone who's in Israel. And then if you're not, then we'll send out the report for everybody. Yep, Israel should be for Torah observant Israelis. No Islam, no Christianity, no rabbinical Judaism, no Talmud, Kabbalah, etc. Yep, it should, but it ain't. One of these days, either the easy way or the hard way, it will be. So, okay, let me now bring up Leviticus 15. And we're actually a bit more than halfway through Leviticus. And Leviticus is the most grueling, if you can use that word, or the most difficult book to get through. It's very technical, There's very little narrative. There's no excitement. There's no killings or anything like that. Well, except for Nadav and Avihu in chapter 10. But it's very technical, but I find it very fascinating. I really do. I've mentioned that a bunch of times. I think I mention that every week. But I think when it's understood in its holistic context, in other words, why these laws are being given and where they fall into the bigger picture, meaning the basic bottom line is, in this part of Leviticus, we've been speaking about being tahor or tameh, being clean or unclean, being in a state of ritual purity or ritual impurity. When one realizes that this all has to do with the Beit HaMikdash, with the Mishkan, with the holy area, with the tabernacle / temple, that you have to be super, super clean before you go into God's house. Just like you wouldn't go to the White House. Well, you might if Biden were president, but if Donald Trump were president, you wouldn't go to the White House, in looking like what's his name, Fetterman. What's the guy's name again? John Fetterman, that guy from Pennsylvania that looks like he's a garbage man or something like that, right? You wouldn't go to the White House dirty in old ragged clothes or something like that, right? You would go to the White House dressed in your finest clothes. You would go to the White House, having taken a shower. Having gotten a haircut and all this kind of stuff. So the analogy is, when you go to God's house, you're not going to go there in a state of ritual impurity. You're not going to go there having the cooties, having disgusting ickiness all over your body, which is then going to defile the house of God. And that's really the overarching context of this entire topic that we've been studying of ritual impurity and purity, as it's usually translated as having the cooties or not having the cooties, as being disgusting or being icky and being unicky or being not icky. And it all has to do with God's house. And remember, when we started off the book of Leviticus, we spoke about the 5 basic types of sacrifices. And so this goes hand in hand with that. We cannot go bring those sacrifices at the house of God unless we are in a state of cleanliness, unless we're in a state of ritual purity, just like you wouldn't go to the White House if you were, not clean. Okay, so that being said, let's dig in. Let me present in a different way here. So share screen. We're going to go to window. We're going to go to Torah. No. Yes. Boom. There we go. And we're going to start digging in with Leviticus. Well, we didn't finish 14, but I'm really not going to do the end of 14. It's the end of the chapter that deals with tzara'at, with leprosy. And I think we've had enough of it. We get the idea. I will read through it. So we spoke about leprosy that can affect, well, there were 2 chapters on leprosy, right? So we spoke about it affecting the skin of a human being. Skin blight is the way that Robert Alter, who's our kind of go-to initial commentary, translates it as. And then we spoke about it affecting clothes, okay, fabric and clothes. That was in chapter 13. Then in chapter 14, we spoke about how to cleanse oneself, the cleansing ritual that one has to go through in order to cleanse oneself, in order to return to a state of purity, of unickiness, from that skin blight, from that leprosy. And now we're going to talk about leprosy that is caught by a house. Well, again, they call it tzara'at. Or do they? We'll see in a second. But it's related to that. Okay, it's translated as molds. So the house can actually, quote unquote, catch quote unquote leprosy. And let's see what happens there. Again, I'm not going to linger on it at all, but I do want to be complete. So I'm just going to basically read through it. I'm going to do what I call express study. I'm just going to go through it. If I have some minor commentaries, then I'll make them. But other than that, I'm not going to make any commentaries on it, because I think we've had enough of tzara'at, and we want to move on to the next topic. So let me bring this up in the Hebrew. This is Leviticus chapter 14, and then we'll get to our main chapter, which we're going to be studying today, which is 15. So let's see, where is it? Signs of home contamination. Why Kavod Yahweh? So we're in Leviticus chapter 14, verse 33. Just make sure everything is coming up here. Looks like it is. Sound is good. Okay. Remember, please, if you see me studying a text, if we're studying a text together and you do not see that text on the screen, let me know. If my sound is off, let me know. If things start freezing up and don't unfreeze within a minute or two, let me know. Okay. I don't have a sound engineer. I'm waiting for Phil to come move to Israel so he can be my sound engineer. But until that time, you guys have to be my sound engineer and my video engineer, and let me know if there are any problems. Just type into the comments. I check the comments every couple of minutes, and I will see the comment and know that something's wrong. Okay, so you should now see me, hear me, and you should see the Leviticus chapter 14 in Hebrew on the screen. If you don't, let me know, please. So verse 33, Vaydaber Yahweh el Moshe el Aharon lemor. So Yahweh spoke to Moses and Aaron. We see and Aaron. That usually means it's going to have to do something with the priests, as is most of the case in Leviticus. That's why the book is called Leviticus in English, right? Leviticus, Levitical Levi, right? Leviticus, Levitical means of the Levites, right? Of the Levites, speaking about the Levites specifically, the Kohanim for the most part. Okay, verse 34. Ki tavo el eretz Canaan, when you go into the land of Canaan, asher ani noten lachem lachuzah. When you go into the land of Canaan, which I'm giving you as inheritance or as a land holding, lachaz means to grab onto or to hold onto. So a land holding maybe would be a better translation. Let's see how they translate it here. A possession. Okay. Curious. Let's see how Everett Fox translates that one, because he's a pretty darn good translator. Torah, Everett Fox, Leviticus 14. Just out of curiosity. 25. Huh. Right on the money. Leviticus 14. What verse? 34. Translated, giving you as a holding. Yep, he translates it as a holding. So good translation. Okay. Alrighty. Lachuzah. And I implant in a house the within the land of your possession, or the land of your land of your holding, the neged tzara'at, the plague of tzara'at, the plague of, well, we were translating this before as skin blight, but this is not skin. This is talking about a house catching tzara'at. Let's see how Robert Alter translates that one out of curiosity. So Leviticus 14, 34. He's not going to translate it as skin blight. Probably translate as mold or something like that. It's a holding. I put the scaly affliction in the house of the land of your holding. Interesting. Interesting. Let's get a comment on that. Okay, scaly affliction. The Hebrew verb used here is identical with the one just employed for God's giving the land. Theological notion, adumbrated. Adumbrated. He always uses his words. I have to go look up what the heck does adumbrated mean. That is a dumb word. Adumbrated. I'm looking it up. Adumbrated. Adumbrate. Report or represent in an outline. Jeez, I've never heard that word. Where was this guy when I was studying for my SATs? For real. So, okay, adumbrated in the pun, God bestows both great bounty and also blight. Okay, the Midrash and hidden gold in the walls. Okay, I think we can skip that. That's not relevant. So, verse 35. Okay, uva. So we have tzara'at, which he's translating again as what? As scaly affliction. So he's not translating as skin blight. He's translating as scaly affliction. The reason is one of the symptoms. One of the possible symptoms of tzara'at is scaly. We saw it was a masa. I think it was translated as a nasa or something like that, where the skin is scaly, is raised up off the rest of the skin. Okay. Tzara'at b'beit achuzatem, verse 35. Uva asher ro habayit wahayid la kohen lemor. So the house owner, the owner of the house, which reminds me of a funny joke. I didn't make it up myself. They asked, I think it was Johnny Carson asked Jaja Gabor, if you remember who these people are kind of really before my time, kind of, but I heard the joke and I thought it was funny. So Jaja Gabor was actually, she was a Jewess who was born in Hungary. Jaja is actually a common Hungarian, I don't know if it's a name or a nickname, but there were two sisters, Jaja and Eva Gabor, and they were kind of like actresses, models. And Jaja Gabor had been married many, many times. And so Johnny Carson, a talk show host, asked her, in America, famous talk show host, asked her, she sings, she dances, does all that kind of things. So asked her what her profession is. And she said, I'm a housekeeper. And he said, what? What do you mean you're a housekeeper? She says, yes, I marry men and then I divorce them and I keep the house. I'm a housekeeper. Anyway, I don't know why I thought of that joke, but it's very funny. Okay, she's a housekeeper. All right. So you're going to go, so the house owner, the housekeeper, or the house owner is going to go and to the Kohen and say, it looks like I have some kind of a plague, some kind of affliction on my house. Verse 36. Kohen wapinu et habayit. So the Kohen is going to command the person to evacuate the house. Or pinu might even mean empty the house of all its possessions. Let's see. Tell the priest. Let's see. The priest clear the house. So nothing in the house is unclean before the priest comes to see the affliction. Okay, fine. So it's taking all the possessions. You know what the bayit? B'terem yavo kohen nirot et hanega velo itma kol asher babayit. Right. So the Kohen is going to tell the person that he should take everything out of the house before the Kohen comes to take a look at the plague, at the affliction, at the infestation, if you want to call it that. No, infestation is not the right word. The affliction on the house of Loitma, in order that he not become impure, he not enter a state of ritual impurity, because if he does, then he will not be allowed back into the temple area. Kol asher babayit, in other words, clean out everything that's in the house. V'achar ken. And only after the house has been cleared out, then the Kohen will come take a look at the house, come examine the house. Verse 37, and maybe we can get a commentary there. Okay, so the vagueness of the phrasing reflects the uncertainty of the homeowner's diagnosis. Right, he's not an expert. The homeowner is not a diagnosis. The Kohen is supposed to be the doctor when it comes to these kinds of things. That's one of their jobs, is to be able to diagnose tzara'at, whether it's on a human being, whether it's on clothing or other vessels, or whether it is on a house. We have already observed the peculiar extrapolation from scaly skin disease to blight or mildew in fabrics. Now the owner of the house contemplates what is evidently some sort of mold or mildew in the walls of his house and wonders whether it exhibits a certain similarity which the diagnosing priest could establish as actually the very same pathology to the skin disease called tzara'at. Okay? Alrighty. Verse 38. We have Tzah Kohen min habayit. Just check in and see if there's any comments here. Wa yatzah Kohen min habayit el petach habayit. Wa yisgir et habayit shiv'at yamim. So after the Kohen comes to check it out. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a verse. That's why it doesn't make sense. Verse 37. So he comes and sees, and it looks like there's this infestation, this not infestation. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. Whatever. This plague. I don't like plague. We'll go with infestation in a mold infestation in the walls of the house. Shika'arurot, I have no idea what that word means. Let's look it up. With ingrained streaks is how it's translated here. See how Robert Alter translates it. I assume this word is only used once in the entire Torah, or maybe a couple times, but only in relation to this. It's only used once. So it's what's called a hapaklegomenon. That means fancy. It's a fancy Greek term for a word that only appears once in a text. And they're typically very difficult to translate, obviously, because we don't have a lot of context for them. So here, Depression or hollow is how Strong's translates it. BDB, which usually Strong's takes from. Depression, hollow, plural, shaka'arurot, etc. So we'll go with that. Robert also translates it as, if he sees the affliction, and look, the affliction is in the walls of the house, greenish or reddish hollows that seem lower than the wall. That's how he translates it. Greenish or reddish hollows that seem lower than the wall. Okay. So hollows is how he translates shaka'arur rot. Okay. And I guess it comes from, okay, it actually does make sense because it's very possibly related to the underlying root of shaka, shin, kuf, ayin. Shaka means to go down. Like when the sun goes down, it's shokea. Shkiat shemesh, although that's not typically used it is used a couple times in the Tanakh. But it means the sun going down. So shaka rurot, the rurot might mean it's just a kind of a suffix on the verb that might mean symptoms of or separate instances of. So yeah, okay, that makes sense. So hollows is how he translates it. Indentations, here they translate it as ingrained streaks. At any rate, whatever the heck they are, we'll go with hollows, yirakrakot, or adam damoth. So either greenish or reddish. Umarehem shafal minakir. Here we have explicit, and their appearance is indented or is concave from the wall. Shafal means low. Like for instance, the coastal plain, where we have the modern day cities, the city of Tel Aviv, and the other coastal cities on the coastal plain is called the Shvela. It's called that also in biblical Hebrew. The Shvela means the lowlands. Okay, so shafal means lower than the wall. So it's some kind of indentation. It's some kind of sinking in. I mean, you could imagine like mold, like rotting away the wall, and then it just like falling in a little bit, or like causing like a concave kind of sinkhole or something like that. Not really a hole, but concave indentation. So that's what we're talking about. So either a reddish or greenish kind of indentation in the wall. Okay. All righty. Let's close this off. Let's see what else. 37. All righty. Let's go on. Verse 38. Vayetza kohen min habayit el petach habayit. So he now sees that it has these green or red indentations, these green or red kind of moldy kind of indentations in the wall. And the kohen exits the house to the house of the door of the house, the entrance of the house. And he closes off the house for 7 days. Okay, just like we saw in other instances of the Tzara'at, where there's a 7-day quarantine, and then it's examined at the end of the 7 days. Verse 39, if you remember, right? In a number of cases. V'shava kohen bayom hashvi'i, and on the 7th day he returns. V'ra'a v'hine pasa hanega b'kirot habayit, and if he sees that the affliction, that the infestation, the mold infestation is spread out throughout the house, right? Very similar to the other diagnosis that we saw. Wait, 7-day period. Has it gone away, or has it gotten worse? So if he sees that it's spread out around the house, wasiva kohen wahatzu et avanim asher bahen hanega. So the kohen shall now command that the rocks, or the stones, which have been afflicted with this infestation, this disease, be removed from the house, be cut out from the house, be basically pounded out from the house. Kutsu means to free, but it means like how do they translate here? Let's get an official definition. Take away? Nah, I don't like that. Basically, they remove. Maybe remove is the best. They remove those stones from the house that have this affliction on it. Okay. This also implies clearly that houses in ancient Israel were made of stone, as they were for the most part, until modern construction came about in the past 100 years or so in Israel. But for instance, in the city of Jerusalem, to this day, there's a law that every building has to have a what's called Jerusalem stone, has to have a facade of Jerusalem stone. It was no, 1 second. One sec. We have elevator visitors. And off they go. Either up or down, I don't know. So to this day, there's a law in Jerusalem that all the buildings have to have, now they're made of concrete for the most part, but they have to have a facade of what's called Jerusalem stone. It's limestone. If you come to Jerusalem, you'll see it all over the place. But that's because until modern construction techniques became widespread, so stones in this area were made of, houses in this area were made of stones. And I actually when I lived in Ein Kadam in the early 2000s, one of my favorite places ever to live. The house that I lived in was actually made of stones. It wasn't stone facade. It was an actual stone house. And if you go into any of the, let's say, the older Arab houses, they call them Arab style houses mostly were conquered and taken over by Israel in 1948 or 1967, then you will see that these old style houses are actually made of stones. Okay, so we see here that even in ancient times, the houses were made of stone, not of wood. Why not of wood? Because there was not an abundance of wood in this part of the world. Maybe the nearest big forests were in northern Israel and specifically in Lebanon. We have more elevator visitors. 1 second. Yep. Oh. 1 second, please. Okay, these people actually got off the elevator and passed through the co-working space, which is the first time that's happened. Usually the elevator doors just open and then close again. Hold on a second. I'll just close the door here. If anyone has any duct tape, please bring it to me right now. I want to duct tape these elevator doors shut. Or maybe there's some setting I can make it just skip this floor. Anywho, okay, so right, so there's a lack of wood, right? The nearest forests are really in northern Israel. Even in ancient times, they were more in the north of Israel and in Lebanon, especially. We know that in the case of the building of was it David's palace? Yes, it was David's palace, and then later, I think also for the Beit HaMikdash, we know that the king of Tsur, Hinam, up in Lebanon, who is very friendly with both David and Solomon, sent wood down from the forests of Lebanon to the city of Jaffa, where they were picked up and then brought up to Jerusalem to build King Solomon's temple and to build his palace, or to build King David's palace, and then to build the temple by King Solomon. Cedar wood, specifically cedar of Lebanon. Okay, so where were we before the elevator people so rudely interrupted us? Okay, so you remove those stones that are afflicted with this mold infestation, and you toss them outside of the city, el makom tameh, to an impure place. And I think this means not an impure place, but a place where it doesn't matter if it becomes impure, or maybe it does mean a place where outside each city, maybe there was a certain place that was reserved, just like we saw that in certain cases for certain sacrifices that the remains of the animal were brought to the ash pile, which was a pure place. Maybe there was a similar place outside the cities, basically where anything that was in a state of, had the cooties in a state of ritual impurity, kind of like a garbage dump, right? That's where it was kept. That's where it was thrown. Okay, so yeah, like an impure garbage dump, a cooties garbage dump, right? Like let's say kind of like a biohazard garbage dump or something like that, right? I would assume that's actually what it means, right? That each city might have had outside the city a specific place where they threw anything that had assumed a state of cooties, of ritual impurity. Okay. All right. So let's see if there's any commentary here. Verse 40, fling them outside into an unclean place. As the emphatic languages suggests, what is involved is not a neutral act of removing contaminants, but a ridding of the community of noxious impurities that are to be consigned with vehement energy to a place of impurity outside the pale of the community, right? Just like the leper, again, for lack of a better translation, has to go outside of the camp, right? If he's been diagnosed with tzaraat, if he's been diagnosed with skin blight, he has to live outside of the camp. He can't live in the camp. So same thing here. These stones are thrown out. They're tossed outside of the city into the biohazard waste dump. Okay, the Kuti waste dump. Here we go with the elevator again. Let's see what happens. I'm waiting. Okay, 1 second. 1 second, please. Okay, so where were we? So that's that, okay? Okay. Wet the bayit, yaktzia, mi bayit saviv. Yaktzia is again a word that's not too common. Yaktzia here they translate as scraped. So Robert Alter deals with that one, and the house shall be scraped from within all around. Okay. So vet the bite yaktzia mi bayit saviv. So inside mi bayit is as opposed to the word michutz. Michutz means outside of something. Mi bayit means inside of something. Just like you have in the building of the tabernacle. Where is it mentioned? Mi bayit mi v'chutz or michutz. I can't remember, but it's a common phrase, inside or outside of a structure. So within, so all around the house, all around the house within on the inside is going to be scraped down. Okay, and the dust that's gathered, and remember we're talking about stones. So the stones are scraped down. So the stones that are clearly have this infiltration, this infestation, are removed and thrown in the biohazard waste dump outside of the city. And then the rest of the house, the remaining stones of the house that don't visibly have this infestation, are scraped down. And the dust that is gathered is dumped into that same biohazard waste dump, that biohazard waste area outside of the city. Okay? All right. Verse 42. ולקחו אבנים אחרות והביאו אל תחת האבנים עפר אחר ייקח ותח את הבית. Okay, I'll explain. I said something a bit wrong. I'll just correct it in a second. But let's, okay. ולקחו, I was actually thinking it, but it wasn't clear to me, but now it is. Okay. ולקחו אבנים אחרות, so they're going to bring other stones in their place. והביאו את תחת האבנים, and they're going to put them in place of the stones that they removed and threw out into the biohazard waste dump outside of the city. ועפר אחר and they're going to take more dust, and I'll explain what this means in a second, and they're going to what's the word in English? Sayed, I forgot how to say in English. Sayed. They're gonna, oh, let's see what the translation is. Plaster. Okay, perfect. So the afar, so okay, I said one mistake. When they scrape down the house, it isn't the stones that the dust is coming off of. The stones are whitewashed with plaster. This is a common theme that's used throughout the Tanakh. Though you've committed sins that are as black as dirt, you have whitewashed them. You have covered them over with plaster, with white plaster. Okay, and so we see here again, we get insight into the construction methods in ancient Israel. So we had these stones, these buildings that were made out of stone, and inside they were whitewashed with plaster. Afar literally means dust, but the afar is referring to the dust of the plaster, and plaster is made out of, I don't know, I'm not going to look it up right now. I guess there are construction experts out there, or ancient Israelite construction experts who know exactly what it would be made out of. I think maybe they actually took those same stones, this limestone, and they might have ground it into thin dust, and then added water to it, and that might have constituted the plaster. I don't know. We'd have to look into exactly these ancient Israelite building techniques to get an exact answer, but that's the idea. Okay, so so basically they rub all the plaster, they remove the stones that have this disease, that have this infestation, and then they rub all the plaster off the rest of the stones. They replace the stones that they removed, and they throw the rest of the plaster out into that biohazard waste pile. Okay. And then they bring more plaster and they plaster up the house again. Okay, so basically they remove the bad stuff, scrape everything down, and then repair. Okay, verse 43. ואם ישוב הנגע ופרח בבית אחר, חילץ את האבנים, and if the affliction, the infestation returns and spreads out around the house after those stones have been removed, ואחרי יקצות את הבית, and after this house has been scraped down of all its plaster, the inside of the house has been scraped down of all its plaster, ואחרי היטוח, and after it has been replastered, well, we know what's coming next, right? For the most part. Then they're going to call back the Kohen. He's going to take a look at it. And if he sees that the infestation is spread out around the house again, he babayit tamehu. Oh, here we go. The elevator again. 1 second, please. Empty elevator this time. Shabbat Shalom Qor 2. QOR2. Are you a robot from Star Wars? You're like R2D2's cousin or something like that. Okay, so mam eret. So mam eret. We saw this word before. They translate it. It's translated usually as active. So mam eret ibabayit tamehu. So at any rate, we see now that it really is, that Band-Aid solution didn't get rid of the problem, and now the house is declared tameh. It's declared as having the cooties. It's declared as being ritually impure. It's being unclean. Okay. Verse 45. When that's it, habayit it avanau wa'et itzau wa'et kol afar habayit wa'otzi el michutz la'ir el makom tameh. The house is knocked down. The house is demolished. That literally natatz means to break into pieces. So the house is broken into pieces, including its stones, its wood, and all of its plaster. All of the plaster of the house. Okay. So now again, we get a little bit more insight into ancient Israelite building techniques. So there was stone, there was some wood. We see this like in King David's palace, where he has cedar wood. Everything's lined. The interior is lined with cedar wood, and then the stones are covered with plaster. Okay, and all of this, the whole house is demolished, and then all of the remains, all of the rubble is taken outside of the city and makom tameh, to the biohazard waste dump, and dumped there. Verse 46. And anyone who enters into the house during the time that it had been quarantined, remember 7 days quarantine, we weren't sure whether it really did have the affliction or whether it didn't. So anyone who had entered into the house during those 7 days, yitma ad erev, now he acquires that ritual impurity, and he remains impure until the evening. Okay, he doesn't have to do anything more than that. If he entered the house, the only thing he has to do is wait until the evening, and then the ritual impurity just magically disappears at sunset. We see this for the lightest contact between something that is ritually impure, that has the cooties, and another person. So he didn't. Well, we'll see. We'll contrast it with verse 47. And anyone who's either slept in the house or lay down in the house, or is eaten inside the house, then he's going to wash his clothing as well. Okay. So that's greater contact. If you just walked in the house, walked around and then walked back out, then you just wait to the evening and your cooties just magically go away. If, however, you've slept in the house or laid down for a rest in the house, or you've eaten in the house, now you've had greater contact with this infested house. And now you, in addition to waiting until the evening, which is the implication here, then you also have to wash your clothes. Okay, because you've sat down, your clothes have also come in contact. If you're just walking in the house, your clothes ostensibly have not come in contact with the house. But if you've laid down in the house or you've eaten in the house, you've either sat down or laid down in the house, and then your clothes have also come in contact with the house. They've acquired this ritual impurity, and they have to be cleansed. Okay. All right. Let's go on. Any questions? Any comments so far? The sun kills cooties. Maybe. Elevator. The evil elevator. The magic elevator. I'm telling you, it's like having imagine if they built a hotel, okay, and in your bathroom was like the elevator doors. And you never know when the elevator doors are gonna open and there's gonna be like a family standing there. That's what I feel like. Okay. All right. So right, verse 48. So that's how the house gets the cooties. Now, how does the house get rid of the cooties? Well, we saw that if the 7-day waiting period wasn't enough, or if there was a 7-day waiting period and then afterwards it had spread out, or later on it spreads out, then the house is broken down. Verse 48. Let's see what happens if it actually does get better after the 7-day waiting period. Verse 48. Ve'imba בו יבוא הכהן וראה והנה לא פסע נגע בבית אחרי לפתוח את הבית ותיאר הכהן את הבית כי נרפא הנגע. So if after the, I'm going to just paraphrase here, if after that 7-day waiting period, that 7-day quarantine period for the house, where the stones have been removed, the house has been replastered, that after that 7-day period, that nothing has happened, that it hasn't spread again, then where is it? The Kohen will declare the house to be clear of the affliction, because it has clearly been cured of that infestation. Verse 49. את הבית שתי ציפורים, ועץ ארז ושני תולעת ואזוב. And now he's in order to so lechate. Here they're going to translate it as purify or something like that, cleanse. But what it really means, yeah, I guess it does mean that. I just want to see something for myself. Let's see if the BDV says they're related. Yeah, right. Of course, chet is with an aleph. So it comes from the same word as purification from sin, like the chatat. Remember, the third type of offering was it? Let's see, it was the fully burnt offering, then the grain offering. No, then was the peace offering or the fellowship offering. Then was the fourth type of offering, the chatat, which is usually translated as sin offering, but we translated it as a purification from inadvertent sin. So it's purification from sin. So so what this really means is to purify from this dirtiness, from this uncleanliness, okay, to get rid of the quote unquote sin. It's not really sin. There's no moral. Oh, maybe there is a moral overlay here because maybe it's God's punishment that the house had this infestation. But at any rate, the idea here is they'll translate it usually as to cleanse or to how do you say it in English? To mechate in modern Hebrew is disinfectant. So to disinfect, I'll go with, right? So that's the usual translations you're going to get, but it's a bit more complex than that. Lichate really means to how do we translate it? Chatat is to make some kind of recompense or make some kind of cleansing, make some kind of recompense for inadvertent sin. Okay, it's related to that same idea. Okay, so lechatei the bayit. So in order to, so now there are going to be some sacrifices that are brought, right? And this is going to be shnei tzipurim v'etz erez v'shnei tola'at v'ayazov. And we saw these same things earlier. We saw this with was it the clothing? I don't remember now. I think it was also with the clothing, if I'm not mistaken. So you're going to bring 2 birds. Eitz erez is cedar wood, u'shnei tola'at, and 2 scarlet cloths, wa'ezov, and hyssop. We saw this exact same formulation, I believe, with in chapter 13, with cleansing for the clothing that has got infested with the mold, or the tzarad. V'shachat et tzipor echad el kli cheres el. It's exactly the same repeat. I'm pretty sure. Let me just look it up. I'm pretty sure it's with the clothing. Let me look it up for 1 second here. Clothing. Oh, I know how I can find it very quickly. I know I'll find it very quickly. 1 second here. 1 second. Because I just want to be clear on where else we saw this exact same formulation. So we can go with genital Izov. Izov in the concordance. 14, 16, 14. Okay, so 14.4. 14.4. So it's in chapter 14. 14.4. So it's the cleansing of the human leper. Okay, in verse 4 here. It's the same thing right here. Okay, so it's the cleansing of the human leper, of the human person who had been infected with tzaraat. These same items. Okay, so let's go back down here. Okay, so 2 birds, cedar wood, 2 scarlet cloths, and hyssop. Verse 50. So 1 bird is going to be slaughtered. Its neck is going to be slit over an earthenware vessel, or over an earthenware vessel with water running over it. Okay, so the water is gonna drain the blood out into the earthenware vessel. Verse 51. ולקח את עץ הארז ואת הזוב ואת שני תולעת ואת הציפור החיה, and then תראה כהן את הבית כי נרפא ולחטא את הבית. Yeah. So then the person who's cleansing his house is going to take the cedar wood, the hyssop, the 2 cloths of scarlet, and the remaining living bird, and dip all of these into the blood of the bird that was slaughtered, and that had been diluted now with that running water. And he's going to sprinkle on this onto the house 7 times. Okay, so all these things are dipped in. So it's almost like for those of you who know the rabbinical. Second, the elevator. 1 second, please. Seriously. One second. So okay, so all these things are going to be dipped in. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the cedar wood, the hyssop, the scarlet cloths, and the living bird. So these 4 things. So it's almost like, I guess they're held together, kind of, or maybe they're dipped separately. I guess they're kind of held together, and just like the lulav and the etrog. For those of you who are familiar with the rabbinical Sukkot things that are held together, right? You have the lulav, the etrog, the hadas, and the aravot nachal. These 4 species, as they call it, are held together and then shaked, right? While the person shaking it does the funky chicken. So, anywho, these 4 things are dipped into the blood of the bird that was slaughtered, and then from these 4 things, are used to sprinkle that blood onto the walls of the house that has now been declared clear of the infestation. Verse 52. And he will achieve cleansing for the house with the blood of the bird and with the running water, and with the rest of those items. Verse 53. And he shall let the bird loose. The living bird shall be let free to fly outside of the city, or to go outside of the city, or maybe starting outside of the city. To fly away from the city out into the open field. And in doing so, he will have achieved atonement for the house, and the purification process will have been finished, or will be over. Verse 54. This is the instruction manual, Torah. Remember, we said until we get to the book of Deuteronomy and beyond, the word Torah does not mean the Torah as we usually use it. It means the instruction manual for a certain set of instructions. In this case, we're talking about the instruction manual for what to do with a house. Okay. So this is for any tzarat infestation of the house, and also for any scale disease. Natek means disconnected. Verse 55, the tzarat habeged ulabayit, and this is interesting. And for the affliction, the tzarat affliction for clothing and for house. So even though I'll talk about this in a second, let me just finish off. Laset ulesafachet ulebaheret leorot biyom hatameh ubiyom hatahor. Zot Torat Atzarat. So this is kind of a total summary sentence that sums up, starting really, I guess, from the beginning of chapter 13. Okay, so this is a summary sentence for the entire topic of Tzarat, of these various types of blight. Okay, and it includes all the different things we saw for clothing and for homes, and for these three afflictions that can happen on a person's skin, which were whatever it was, inflammation. I don't remember how they were translated. Inflammation, brightness, whatever it was. And to explain how someone enters into a state of purity, literally and to instruct on the day of one becoming impure and one becoming pure, but means how someone enters into a state of ritual impurity and regains a state of ritual purity. Zot Torah Tatzarat. And in conclusion, this is the instruction manual. This is a set of instructions regarding tzarat. And with that, we come to the end of the topic of tzarat, the end of the topic of what's generally translated as leprosy, what we've translated as skin blight when it comes on a human being, or as some kind of mold infestation when it occurs on a piece of clothing or on a house. Okay, so that's it. That's the end of the topic of leprosy. This is right in the middle. Chapters 13 and 14 are basically right in the middle of the book of Leviticus. The book of Leviticus has 27 chapters. So it's right in the middle of the book of Leviticus. And quite frankly, it's in my opinion, it's the hardest topic to digest, to understand, and to wrap one's head around. Okay. So we've gotten over the hump by getting through this topic of tzaraat, by getting through this very difficult and inaccessible topic of leprosy. We'll translate it that way. And although the rest of the book of Leviticus is still quite technical in many ways, it nonetheless is going to be more accessible than this particular topic. Okay, so I think we'll take a break here for 5 minutes. I'm going to put on some music. Any questions, any comments before we do? I'm going to go grab some water. I'm going to take a break, and I will be back in about 5 to 10 minutes. Let me put on some music, and then we will continue. Remember, we're going to stop the study at 7:45 sharp, or before then, actually, because we have the new moon observation. We're all going to go out if we're in the land of Israel. We're all going to go out wherever you are, and we are going to search for the new moon. Okay, and it's going to be somewhat of a difficult. Sighting. The moon does not have a very high illumination, meaning it's only a very thin crescent that'll be visible tonight, and that means that A, it's dim, and B, it's closer to the sun, so there's less of there's a smaller lag time between the setting of the sun and the setting of the moon, and the only time you could potentially see the new moon is after the sun sets and before the new moon sets. So the lag time here, that the time that the moon could actually be visible to the naked eye, is going to be about, I think we said 40 minutes or so, something like that. Okay. I think we started at 17:15, Whitey boy. All right, so let me put a bit of music on. Be back in about 5 to 10 minutes.
Sifat Hachamin, Sifat Hachamin. Adon Yishai, Beis Alachmi, Kol Evadau, Achigeh, Kol Avalon. He's not may overcome me, overcome me. If she begins, if I me, save me. He's not may overcome me, overcome me. If she begins, if I me, save me. Mashivchi kamayim kamayim libe Enoichach b'nei Hashem Mashivchi kamayim kamayim libe Enoichach b'nei Hashem Shifchi kamayim kamayim liber V'noichach b'nei Hashem Shifchi kamayim kamayim liber V'noichach b'nei Hashem Ushivchi kamayim liber V'noichach b'nei Hashem Shifchi kamayim kamayim liber V'noichach b'nei Hashem Shifchi kamayim liber V'noichach b'nei Hashem Shifchi kamayim kamayim liber V'noichach b'nei Hashem soulmate, the heart of my heart, Neila, and to all the mothers, to all the holy mothers who bring down their children to this world. Melech Magayon Mavai Vat Kevorter Vevei Simayon Shvavava Kovademach Levevei Avayon Elokon Ilei Karore Sona me poma yevo so yamape azame ni goy goro so amame nivaga nikola mayo Kovori boy no la Pei al mayo Adu Melech Magayon Da 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 da
Okay, we are back. We are back. And now we're going to dig into Leviticus chapter 15. Let me share the screen. Get rid of these things. This goes bye-bye. This goes bye-bye. Okay, so now we're going to get into Leviticus chapter 15. And Leviticus chapter 15 deals with something that is going to be a bit more accessible. And this is going to be, shall we say, regular and also irregular discharges of various substances from the penis of a man or the vagina of a woman. And we'll see exactly what that means in just a bit. This is also going to, well, we'll talk about it. It should be pretty obvious. Okay, let me share the screen. So this is something we can relate to much more than tzara'at, than skin blight, or houses catching spiritual mold infestations, or whatever the case may be. And that's why I say we've really gotten over the hump here. So now getting into Leviticus 15, we're going to be dealing with things that make a little bit more sense and are a little bit more accessible, and it's going to be kind of downhill. I don't mean downhill. It's going to be kind of cruising from here down to the end of the book of Leviticus. Okay, so let's dig right in. We're in chapter 15, verse 1. Before I do, any questions, any comments before we dig in? Okay, so we're going to talk, as I said, about regular emissions from a man's penis and from a woman's vagina, and that means, in the case of a man, it means semen in the context of just having even regular sexual relations, and in the case of a woman, that means having her monthly period, having her monthly menstrual cycle, and the release of the blood and other substances that's involved with that. Okay, so let's begin at the beginning. Verse 15, chapter 15, verse 1. There we have that formula of Moshe and Aaron. We know we're going to be dealing with something that has to do with the Kohanim, because it's also, Yahweh is speaking also to Aaron, right? And that also shows that Aaron is a prophet, just like Moses, or not exactly the same status of Moses, but that Yahweh also speaks to Aaron just as he does to Moses, okay? Verse 2, Dabru el bnei Israel, speak to the children of Israel, Mata alehem, and say to them, Ish ish ki ye'ezav, mi b'saro zovo tamehu. So we're starting off with, here's the elevator again. Hold on a second. One second. An empty elevator. So we're starting off with strange discharges out of the male member. Okay. Ish ishki ye'ezav mi b'saro zovo tamehu. And we should point out that when you see this word zav in this chapter, zav means some kind of flow, or some discharge is the way they translate it. A better translation would be discharge. That it's speaking about some kind of irregular discharge. Okay, tamehu. So if some kind of weird thing comes out of his, then this means that he's going to enter into a state of having the cooties. This makes perfect sense, right? I mean, we don't want to use our imagination too much. But you could think of diseases like syphilis or whatever. I've never had it, so I don't know the symptoms. But where, I don't know, weird things start coming out of the well, we don't want to get too graphic, but you get the idea. Okay, verse 3. Uezoti et umato bizovo rar bisaro et zovo a ichtim bisaro mizovo. So this is the nature of what will make him have the cooties, give him the cooties. Bizovo rar, and so his this discharge is flowing. Rar is it's related to the word for saliva is rir, so it's like just like saliva would run out of someone's mouth, so it salivates. Maybe would be a better translation. Even I wonder how Robert Alter translates that. It's not going to translate as salivates. That wouldn't make sense, but let's see how he does translate. Second, so he calls it a flux rather than a discharge, which actually makes a lot of sense because zav, I'll explain in a second what that word means. Let's see here. So probably okay, again, let's talk about this word zav. So zav is usually translated here. It's translated as a discharge by the NIV, but Robert Alter translates it as a flux or a flow. 1 second. I think using the word flux is unnecessary. It would have been enough to say a flow. A flux, it sounds like, something out of a sci-fi movie. But okay, so the land of Israel is a land flowing with milk and honey. And that's mentioned a bunch of times in the Tanakh. And in Hebrew, that's zavat chalav u'davash. Zavat chalav u'davash, flowing with milk and honey. Zavat, and here we have that same root, zav. So it means flow. Okay, so it's some kind of discharge. Okay, so in this case, it's dripping. It's like a again, almost like saliva coming out of a mouth, right? It's kind of like salivating. There's some kind of, well, let's see how Robert Alter translates that one. Running. Something, yeah, it's runny, like a drippy nose or like saliva, saliva coming out of a mouth. Okay, basaro. It's zovo oy tim basaro mizovo. Or the other possibility is that this flow has, again, I don't want to get too graphic here, but we'll try to keep it technical, like a doctor talking to his patient. This is when that there's some kind of discharge that stops up the hole in the penis, right? It blocks it. Okay, it dries up and blocks the hole. Okay, so in either of those cases, whether it drips out like saliva or whether it gets blocked up because it dries, it's some kind of weird gunk coming out of his penis. Okay, and that also will put him into a state of having the cooties. Okay, so this makes perfect sense, right? If something weird is coming out of your your thingy, then you got the cooties, man, whether you like it or not. Okay. Verse 4. So any kind of bed or couch that he lies down on, maybe sleeps on, but I guess lies down on, azav, so any kind of couch or bed that the person who has this flow lies down on, yitma, becomes impure. And any kind of anything that he sits on, any kind of chair or stool that he sits on, also becomes impure, because again we saw that kind of earlier in the case of the house. If you just enter the house, then you're just unclean until the evening. If you lie down in the house or if you eat in the house, then you also have to wash your clothing. So the more you contact that a person has with the thing that's ritually impure, with the thing that has the cooties, then the more cooties that he gets. Okay, so in this case, he's going to become impure if he he's not going to become impure. The thing that he lies down on or sits down on is going to become impure. He has contact with it, right? And not only does he have contact with it, that specific part of his body, his genitals, are going to touch the couch, the bed, or the stool, or the chair that he's sitting on, right? That's why it would become impure. It's going to have specific contact. If you lie down on something or you sit on something. One second. Let these people know. So right, so his private parts are going to touch anything he lies down on, anything sits on, and that's the logical reason why it itself is going to gain the status of ritual impurity. Verse 5. And any other person who then touches that which he laid down on, like a couch or a bed, now he has to wash his clothing with a chatzba, and he has to bathe himself with tamei ad erev, and he remains unclean, and he gets the cooties until the evening. Okay, so Shimon and Levi. Shimon has something weird going on down there. He lies down on the couch, gets up. Now the couch has this state of ritual impurity. What does that mean? Okay, it means that now this couch can impart its ritual impurity to another person. That's really where the action is. It doesn't really matter that the couch has ritual impurity. At the end of the day, it only matters that human beings have ritual impurity, because the couch is not going to go to the Beit HaMikdash. The couch is not going to go to the tabernacle. It's not going to go to the temple. The couch is not going to eat of the holy things. So in the end of the day, all that really matters, and that's why the house is knocked down, because the house can impart ritual impurity to other human beings, who then could inadvertently, not knowing they've established, or even knowing they're in a state of ritual impurity, they could now go up to the tabernacle, and they can contaminate the tabernacle with their cooties. Okay, so in the case of the couch, if someone else then comes and sits down on it, okay, or makes contact with it, yiga, it says even touch, but I think it just means actually sit down, right? Now that secondary person is gonna get the cooties himself. He has to wash his clothing, and that proves it's not just touch. That proves that he's actually sitting down on it, right? Otherwise, if he just touched it with his finger, he wouldn't have to wash his clothing. He has to bathe himself, and he remains impure until the evening. So this is what's called secondary ritual impurity. The first person imparts it to something else, in this case an object, a couch or a seat, and then that object can impart the ritual impurity to a third party. That's called secondary ritual impurity. It's like secondary smoke almost, right? Verse 6. Yoshev al הכלי אשר ישב עליו, הזב, יכבס בגדיו וירחץ במים וטמא עד הערב. It's the same thing with verse 6. So verse 5 is dealing with the couch or the bed, the lying down, and verse 6 is dealing with the thing that the person with the discharge, the zav, I'll just use the word zav from now on, this person with this irregular discharge from his penis, and I'm going to use the word, instead of using private area or things like that, I am actually going to use the word penis and vagina, because we're talking about, or maybe I could use the male organ and the female organ. No, I'm just going to use penis and vagina because we're specifically speaking about males and females separately, right? Each is going to have it, obviously has its own anatomy, so it's going to have its own way of, or own phenomena by which it spreads these cooties. Okay, so anyone who sits down on something that he sat down on, the same thing, washes his clothes, bathes, and remains impure until the evening. Verse 7. And anyone who touches the flesh of the zav, the man who has a irregular discharge from his penis, also the same thing. He's going to wash his clothing, he's going to bathe himself, and he's going to remain impure until the evening. So now this is not secondary. This is like, maybe you could say the couch was tertiary, and this is secondary, right? So if someone touches the man who has the zav, again, zav, I'm just going to use the word zav because I don't want to have to say each time the man who has the irregular flow from his penis, it's too long. But anyone who touches the zav directly is now also going to have to do the same thing. He's going to have to wash his clothes, bathe himself, and remain impure, and remain unclean until the evening. Verse 8. Uchi yarok hazav. Okay, there's a cat walking through the hallway here. Uchi yarok hazav b'tahor. And if the zav spits on somebody who's in a state of ritual purity, who doesn't have the cooties, then he gets the cooties, and again he also has to wash his clothing, bathe himself, and remain and stay with the cooties until the evening. Okay, until the sun sets. So we have a bunch of different situations. If you lie down on the couch or bed of a zav, if you sit on the chair or stool of a zav, if you touch a zav, or if a zav spits on you, then you now have the cooties, and you have to wash your clothing, you have to bathe yourself, and you remain with the cooties until the sun goes down. And by the way, the sun is going to go down in very soon. So if you have the cooties, if someone with a discharge from his penis spat on you, then if you're in Israel, then in another half an hour, you get rid of the cooties. Okay. All right. Verse 9. Let me just check in if there are any questions or comments. Any questions or comments? Anybody? Okay, so let's go on. We have more elevator visitors. And it's the same thing with if he's riding on something. So what does this mean? A saddle, a chariot, right? What did people ride on in ancient times? Donkeys, horses, saddles. They sat in chariots. So again, the same thing. So that thing now becomes impure. And I don't think it's speaking about the animal itself. It's speaking about some kind of saddle or some kind of seat that the person is sitting on. And so then if somebody makes contact again, just touches that thing, that saddle or that chariot seat that he was riding on, then he gets the cooties until the sun goes down. But if he actually lifts it up, so you take, let's say you're the person you're his helper, right? Or you own the horse that he was riding on, and he gets to his destination, you take the saddle off, and you change saddles or something like that. Now you've lifted up that saddle. Now you've made more contact with the saddle. Okay, so now you have to do the more extensive tasks, which are wash your clothing, bathe yourself, and remain and keep the cooties until the evening. Okay, verse 11. So if he touches, so we saw if he spits on somebody, Now, if the Zav spits on somebody, then he had to do the three things. And now, if the Zav touches somebody, the same thing. Okay, that person that if he hasn't washed his hands, I should say, if the Zav hasn't washed his hands and he touches another person, then that person has to wash his clothing, bathe himself, and keep the cooties, and has the cooties until the sun goes down. Verse 12, and any earthenware dish. So earthenware dishes were considered to be porous if they were not glazed, which in ancient times, as we know from most of the pottery that was found, that they were generally not glazed. Okay, they were porous. So any earthenware dish that the Zav touches, Yishaber, is shattered, is broken to pieces. And any wooden dish, so wood was generally stained or generally covered with something, because otherwise it would just go bad, right? It would get waterlogged. So it is not porous, and so therefore it doesn't have to be destroyed. It is washed in water. Okay. Alrighty. So that's talking about the Zav. Again, to clarify what a Zav is. A Zav is someone who has an irregular flow coming out of his penis, some kind of weird flux or flow or discharge out of his penis. It could either be dripping out like saliva out of a mouth, or it could be blocking up the hole. And so then he enters a state of having the cooties, enters a state of ritual impurity. Okay, let's get a little bit of commentary here from Robert Alter. Okay, so we're at chapter 15. We want to go to commentary. Okay, from his member, I'm going to read a couple of Robert Alter's commentaries. So verse 2, from his member, Yezav mi besaro. So in this case, in the Hebrew, it really says from his flesh, but obviously the context there is his penis. Okay. The primary meaning of the noun basar is flesh. In the preceding chapter is used as a synecdoche for body. Here is an obvious euphemism for the sexual organ. Okay. Verse 3, running with flux, stopped up with its flux. Since the very term flux, zov, same root manifested in a land flowing with milk and honey, that's what we mentioned earlier, suggests some sort of fluid discharge. There's a need to stipulate that this category of ailment also includes cases in which the discharge is scanty, slow, and viscous, stopped up. Ew, you really, right? We really get the idea that this person, we want to stay away from such a person, right? This person totally has the cooties. Stay away. Remember, we used to go like this when someone had the cooties when I was growing up in the suburbs of New York, going to PS 41 in Queens. Okay, right, more commentary. Any bedding? So that's how we translate mishkav. Mishkav is usually sometimes translated as a couch, sometimes as a bed. The two were kind of interchangeable in ancient times. People had couches / beds that they would sleep on, as the people who sleep on the couch today. But so Robert Alter translates it as bedding, which I think is a good translation. As in the laws pertaining to skin disease and mildew, the concerns is not a medical one of contagion, but a ritual one of contamination, impurity, or uncleanliness. The condition of ritual uncleanliness could be conveyed through secondary contact, and in some instances, even tertiary contact, right? So that's what we said. This is tertiary contact. Here, a substance merely touched by the man with a genital discharge does not contaminate, nor does he convey uncleanliness if he touches someone after rinsing his hands, but contact with a substance that has been pressed against his genital area, bedding or seat, that's what we said earlier, does transmit the impurity. In all of this, the overriding preoccupation of the priestly writers, that is a tip of the hat to the documentary hypothesis, it really should say of Yahweh or of Moses, is to protect the ritual purity of their special domain. The sanctuary, by instituting the system, is sequestering. Sequestering means shutting off, right? Quarantining. And ablution means bathing, washing in water, in order to prevent the spread of the contamination. We said this also. In the pagan world, such contamination was imagined to be imparted by demonic forces. Milgram, who we said is one of the top experts on the book of Leviticus, is certainly right in noting that the monotheistic perspective of Leviticus precludes the notion of the demonic from the conception of impurity, right? It doesn't exist in the Torah. His contention, however, that the opposing forces of life or death manifested in purity and impurity are the consequences of man's moral actions is apologetic. This is irrelevant. This is more philosophy. We don't want to get in there. Okay, so bathe. So the person has to bathe himself. Rahatz b'mayim is the phrase in Hebrew. Wash himself, wash in water. The Hebrew verb rahatz can simply mean to wash, but in these laws it's evident the whole body is to be immersed. Okay, it's evident from the context. Rahatz b'mayim means bathe himself in water. Okay, verse 7 touches the body. Again, the noun used means flesh, but the case of touching a person's genitals is an unlikely one, so the term should be construed here as a synecdoche for body. Abraham ibn Ezra succinctly observes whatever member or limb it may be. Okay, saddle. So we said about that. Merkav refers to anything a person mounted on an animal would sit on, and so includes saddle cloths, pillows, and the like. This is really them referring to. Okay, we can skip this. Okay, Milgram suggests that the earthen vessels to be broken because such implements were cheap, whereas the more costly carved wood vessel was to be rescued for continued use through rinsing. I don't think that's the reason. I think it has to do with the earthen vessel being porous, as we mentioned, so the cooties sink in there and can't get rid of, right? Like if you think of if you had an earthenware vessel, a clay vessel that was not glazed, right? And then you ate pig on it, or someone ate pig on it, okay? As we saw in Leviticus 11, it would have to be broken. It would have to be destroyed because of the pigginess. Right? I used to call it the porcules when I was in Portugal because everything there is pork and seafood. That's what Portuguese eat all day long. So I was always worried about if I had to eat out, even to get a salad, I was always worried about porcules. I was obsessed with porcules in anything. And sadly to say, probably there were sometimes, but there was probably very little, I hope. But that's why I'm glad I'm out of Portugal. Lovely country, but not for Jews. Okay. Glad I'm in Israel where I literally never have to worry about kosher issues when I walk into a restaurant, unless it's like clearly, blatantly a non-kosher restaurant that, like, dogel, how would you say dogel, that takes pride in serving unkosher food. Okay. But I can walk into any falafel joint. I can walk into any sandwich joint. I don't have to worry about porcules being in there. I don't have to worry about seafood being in my food. I don't have to ask, what is it made out of? What is it not made out of? It's such a relief because although I love being in Portugal, it's a lovely country. I mean, it's not easy to be an observant, a Torah observant Jew in Portugal in certain ways. Milgram suggests that the earthen vessel. Okay, we read that. That's it. That's verse 12. I think we're going to stop here. I think this is a good place to stop. Okay, so we spoke about how you get the cooties if you have a discharge, if a man has a discharge from his penis, or if that man comes in contact with another person, or if that man comes in contact with some third object, and then that third object or that second object comes in contact with a person, tertiary, right? Cooties. And so next time we're going to go into how the man gets cleansed. Really, if I had a bit more time, I would go through all the men's stuff, and then next time we'd start with the women. But I don't want to leave things to the last minute. I want to get us ready. I want to be able to say goodbye properly, not leaving things to the last minute. Devarim 23:10 through 15. Let's look at that very briefly. Do 23:10 through 15. Right. So, okay, this is actually very simple. This is a misconception that many people have So the reason is okay. So let me just translate it here. It really is these verses here are the main ones. So this is "Ki tetze machane el oivecha unishmata mikol davar ra." So when you go out and camp against your enemy, so when you go out to war against your enemy, shmata mikol davar ra, so keep yourself distant. So make sure you don't do any incorrect thing, any bad thing. Verse 10. Oops. Ki yeh becha ish asher lo yeh tahor mikre laila. So if there's going to be a person who has a seminal discharge, which they call mikre laila, an event of the night. So that's referring either to a wet dream or maybe he couldn't control himself and pounded one out. Either way, it really I would assume it's referring to a wet dream, that it was not, because mikre means something that kind of happens by chance. So we will see later in chapter 15, Leviticus chapter 15. Is it in chapter 15? Yeah, we will see it. That that when a man emits semen, just regular semen, we're not talking about any kind of weird discharge, but when he emits semen from his penis, even in the context of having sex with his wife, having relations with his wife, even if it gives birth to a child, that both the man and the woman becomes impure. So when semen comes out of a man, right? Again, this is very kind of logical. This is very accessible, right? If someone has done that, you don't want to be around them until they wash themselves off, right? It's disgusting. It's icky. It's cootie stuff, right? So if someone has a wet dream while he's in this war camp. Oh, hey, well, how are you doing? 1 second, please. Okay, so where were we? We're in Deuteronomy 23, right? Okay, so okay, so if someone has this seminal emission, then he enters into a state of ritual purity. As the cooties, he's going to go outside of the camp. And he's not going to re-enter the camp. Okay? And when the sun sets, then he's going to bathe himself in water. And when the sun actually sets, or before the sun sets, he's going to bathe himself in water. And when the sun sets, he can go back into the camp. So what's going on here? Okay, we're not talking about just walking around in the shuk or something like that. We're speaking about the war camp of Israel. Okay, so the first thing to note is that generally when Israel went out to war, they took the Ark of the Covenant with them. So essentially, wherever the Ark of the Covenant is, that's essentially becomes like the tent of meeting. That becomes the tabernacle area. Okay, so that's the first thing. Even if, and it doesn't explicitly say that that's the reason here. So possibly maybe they didn't take the Ark of the Covenant out with them, but nonetheless, Yahweh is with Israel when they fight wars. Yahweh is with Israel in the war camp. So in a certain sense it needs to maintain a special level of purity in order for Yahweh to be among the Israelites. It essentially attains the status of being the house of God, the temporary house of God. Yahweh goes out with Israel to war, and Yahweh helps Israel defeat their enemies, and then Yahweh goes back into the camp or into the villages, into the towns with Israel after defeating the enemies. That's the idea. So that's your answer, Mauricio. That we're not talking about just a regular situation. We're talking about the war camp of Israel. Again, very often the Ark of the Covenant, we see this many times throughout the Tanakh, the Ark of the Covenant was brought out into the war camp, or was brought out with the war camp. Okay, and even if it's not the case that it was brought out, then still we have a situation that war camp is considered to be a sacred area because Yahweh is among the Israelites. Yahweh is fighting for the Israelites. So there has to be a higher level of purity than you would find just like, at the grocery store or on the bus or something like that. Okay. Hope that answers your question. Yeah, pretty much. Well, I mean, when you're in war, you're going to control yourself, right? You're not. The idea is that everybody knows that they're not supposed to enter a state of ritual impurity because that's going to cause God to go away, right? God doesn't want to be around the cooties. You have to keep God's house clean. God is in the camp with Israel, and so the men know that they have to avoid that kind of stuff when they are out in the war camp. Okay, and if they can't for whatever reason, either by chance or they just couldn't control themselves, then that's it. They just have to get out of the camp. They have to wait until the sun sets, and then they can go back into the camp. Okay, to avoid that exact situation. All right. So I hope that answers your question, Mauricio. We're gonna end it here. Yeah, I guess you could put it that way. I mean, it's really required for the temple/tabernacle, but you can consider the war camp to be a kind of temporary temple/tabernacle because God's presence, God's glory. We haven't spoken. We didn't get a chance to speak about that. Okay, we didn't have enough time to get to the third topic that I wanted to cover today, which was Kavod Yahweh, the glory of God. But the glory of when God goes out into the temple, his glory is going to move. I'm sorry, when he goes out into the camp of Israel, fighting for Israel, his glory, the Kavod Yahweh, the glory of Yahweh, is going to move from the tabernacle temporarily out into the camp with Israel because he's fighting for Israel, and then come back to the tabernacle/temple when he has helped Be'ezrat Yahweh, with the help of Yahweh, that he's helped Israel defeat its enemies. Okay, so that's the idea. All right, so let's end it here because I want to get ready for the new moon observation. Just a little bit of information about the new moon observation. If you are in Israel, then you should be going out pretty much now. And let me just pop this in here into the comments. And I'll pop it up here. Okay. So if you're in Israel, the new moon should be visible. The sun sets at 7:48 p.m. The moon sets at 8:27 p.m., which gives us 27 plus 12, 37, 39 minutes, just a bit under 40 minutes to potentially see the moon. So it's going to be a difficult sighting. It's a very, small illumination. And small illumination means also small lag time. So meaning that why is it such small illumination? Because the moon is still close to the sun. If the moon is so close to the sun, then that means the moon is going to set very soon after the sun. So usually we might have a lag time of an hour and a half. That would be an average lag time for an average new moon sighting. Here it's only 40 minutes, and the illumination is, I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's less than 1%. So it means it's going to be a difficult sighting. So we need our best new moon observers out there. Go see where the sun is setting. Use the chart that I sent to the BCS, the Biblical Calendar Society, and to the World Alliance of Qara'im. If you don't have it, let's see if I can post it here. As a matter of fact, no, I can't. I don't know how to do that. But look at it in either of those groups. And if you're in Israel, then position yourself. Use that chart to position yourself to where you see the sun setting, and look for the moon in the place that it should show up. Okay. So we're going to end the study here. It is now 7:39 p.m. here in Israel. I don't know what's going on with this stupid background, but we're going to end the study here. I hope it was an interesting study. We'll pick it up next time in Leviticus chapter 15. And that's it. I'm going to go run to the new moon observation. I'm not going to put music on because I want to pack up the computer and I want to get out there before the sun sets in 8 minutes. So thank you all for joining me. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov wherever you might be in the world. And Be'ezrat Yahweh, we will see you again next week. Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov.